DSV Alvin, also known as Deep Submergence Vehicle 2, is a deep-sea submersible owned by the United States Navy and operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution.
Stop, sealing the hatch.
Carrying 2 passengers and a pilot on each dive, the sub has taken thousands of explorers to depths once thought unreachable.
Every time I get to dive in Alvin, I see something I've never seen before. I get to experience that environment firsthand, and it's often led to big discoveries, not only for my research, but other people as well.
For more than 50 years, the sub has traveled to extraordinary places, capturing the world's imagination and heartbreak. In 1986, it dove on the Titanic, deploying the remotely operated vehicle, Jason Jr., and returning with striking imagery of the site. And following the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2010, Alvin aided scientists investigating the impacts of the oil spill on deep-sea corals.
What sets Alvin apart is its productivity. It's incredibly well supported by the community of researchers that use the vehicle and the National Science Foundation and the Office of Naval Research.
Of its thousands of dives since 1964, there is one often held as the most significant: the discovery of hydrothermal vents near the Galapagos Islands. These alien-like deep-sea communities, where life thrives without the light of the sun, were unknown to humankind before Alvin visited them.
The discovery of vents changed the way we think about life, and Alvin was really the workhorse that did all that work in 1977.
If you look at it on a map, it just looks like a big blue expanse, but down on the bottom, it's a different planet.
Now, Alvin is poised to continue its revolutionary scientific work. With a new set of upgrades and deeper depth rating, the possibilities are endless.
Alvin will be able to map things that we've never seen before that otherwise have not been accessible to human discovery.
How has the research conducted with the Alvin submersible impacted our understanding of the oceans? And what can Alvin's incredible history of discovery, inspiration, and daring tell us about life on Earth and beyond?